Hi. I wanted to talk a little bit about unity and about inner and outer archetypes and a bit about mirroring. So it's not uncommon that the person, the gender that we have an issue with in the outer is also the energy that we have an issue with on the inner landscape. So in unity, we have masculine and feminine energetic principles that are always together. They dance always together and they're always in harmony with each other. In the moment that the energies are not in harmony with each other, they're in a discord, we feel that discord, we feel that tension or that chaos. And there's an invitation within that conflict to rise to a greater sense of harmony, a more expansive state of togetherness. So there's lots of tools that we have to be able to do that. But really the facet that I want to bring attention to or illuminate is that facet of us that suffers, that facet of us that points out into the world and makes the world responsible for what's going on inside of us, the pain that we're feeling, that the world becomes responsible for. Now, innocently, this is not our fault. We're programmed this way to bring our attention out into the world, and all of our senses are pulled out into the world versus abstinence or continence of our senses, being able to abstract the world and keep the potency of energy within ourselves, to hold for ourselves our senses without getting pulled or tempted into the limitations that the world has to offer. Now, when we are understanding this, we could say game, or the way that nature is operating with the inner and the outer, and that there's really no separation between the inner and the outer. And yet there is, and that we thrive in paradox. We start to recognize that the gender in which on the outer we have an issue with is the quality or energy within our own body that we're needing to work with. And it becomes really simple when we start looking at where or who we have contempt for. And this is a very sometimes hidden energy, right? When we are closed off for any reason, really, but we'll simplify it and say to another person. Let's say for me, it's the masculine. There's the masculine on the outer, and I have beliefs about the masculine that when I think these thoughts, they create pain inside myself. And maybe I'm not aware that I have thoughts that create my own pain and in time create my own suffering. And so to avoid feeling it, I push it out and make it about the person, not about the pain. And so I don't remedy the pain that I'm feeling. I try and push away the pain by making it about the other and projecting or transferring energy on the other and making it about the thing that they're doing or who they are that's causing me pain. There's no freedom in this. We can spend our whole lifetime trying to push away something and living in a downward spiral where we become more and more reduced, which means more and more confined in our psycho-somatic space, in our psyche, and the way that we think, where we have very limitations on our creative potential become very reduced because we've imprisoned ourselves by not allowing ourselves to actually move beyond the box that we have limited ourselves to. When we say it is this way, when we say it is this way, there's no creative energy that can come in because our will has identified the righteousness of our posture, and it's this way. And we have lots of very clever and sophisticated ways of validating this here, but it doesn't take away from a greater reality that there's more to it than this. And so when we live our lives imprisoned within our own way of thinking about the world, about the way of the world, about a person, we limit our relationship and intimacy with ourselves. We limit how spirit, the freedom of spirit within ourselves and also in another. We tell ourselves that the way that we see the other person is how they are. And our arrogance would imprison the other and then make us be right. But at the same time, we're jailing them and making them a prisoner in our own mind. You are this way. So we've called them something, but by doing that, we've become the jailer. But we also become the one who can release them as well out of the jail. So that's a lot of power that we've just given ourselves to call somebody something and tell them that they are that something. And even tell other people that they are that something. And if we have ever experienced what that's like, that somebody else does that to us, and we're like, I'm not that. I'm not who you say I am. Sure, maybe some of those things might be true, but that doesn't make the totality of that true. And even if it were true, is it true in spirit? And so when we create these identities for ourselves and the ways that we are in such firmness that spirit can't speak to us anymore, that we are so clear that we're pushing even spirit coming to us in different forms, like maybe another person, maybe through a book, maybe through some random billboard, going through a city, different ways that spirit might communicate to us. We say that's not of spirit. We're not open to seeing things different than the way that we ourselves have chosen to see it. This creates a deep sense of isolation within us. Deep sense of isolation because we are no longer available to spirit, to the freedom, the creativity, and the spontaneity in which spirit arises within us, giving us information, changing and shifting our energy, our paradigms, the ways that we see things, our whole being with one piece of information. And anyone who's lived through a miracle or maybe even religious and has somehow been reborn through their faith, who's had moments where their whole world was shattered, but in such a beautifully ugly way, the paradox, where something, let's say, seemingly awful happened, but actually that in that awful, this beautiful thing happened. When we aren't open to spirit, it isn't uncommon that these things happen, that these ways that spirit still wants to speak to us and move us beyond our own imprisonment is often through suffering, often through moments of a kind of conflict that breaks up our regular programming so that some crack happens, like an earthquake inside of our own building, our own foundation, so that spirit can come through and show us something different. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it is a complete dissolution of what we've known before. when we continue to hold this contempt, this righteousness over another person, and again, using the idea of gender, in my case, let's say masculine, it could be feminine too, but masculine, and I have these thoughts about the masculine, then every masculine I meet is this way, and I'm looking for it because I think it and I'm right. I'm waiting for the outer to prove to me that the way that I'm seeing it is right. And how often do we see that it's true? Because we're that powerful. So because I've conditioned the way that I'm seeing it, I'm filtering all information and looking through a specific lens that isn't allowing freedom for me. It's not allowing freedom for the masculine that's outside of me to actually show up in a way and show me something different, unless I'm open inside of myself to see something different. So when I'm withholding from myself the divinity of the masculine, and I'm holding contempt in my heart, and there could be lots of reasons that, of course, I can have lots of justifications for trauma, things that I didn't ask for, different betrayals, ways that I've been treated, you name it. When I have not worked through those issues inside of myself and come back to a place of neutrality, of forgiveness, you can see some of my other videos about forgiveness, if that's relating to you and how to work with that. If we haven't come back to a place of neutrality, we'll find that we charge the outer with our unhealed wounds about that. So what I am withholding on the outside of myself, I'm also withholding on the inside of myself. There's no unity within myself that's possible when I hold contempt or withhold from the outer something. When I am not okay with the feminine or the masculine outside of myself, those are energies within inside of myself, then I'm also withholding, that I'm also unconsciously dealing with. So if the masculine energy principles represent authority, command, direction, orientation, commitment, form structure, lots of things, those things inside myself I might rebel against. I might rebel against authority. Who do you think you are telling me, a female, what to do? I might, that's not just masculine authority, that's all authority, because that's a principal energy operating within me, a foundation of my own existence that I am withholding from myself. That means all authority, not just towards the masculine. That means divine authority. That means that if I'm withholding authority to the masculine in the outer, and I'm telling that I'm emasculating the masculine by telling him what he's not, and I'm holding that vision for myself, that is hurting me. Yes, that hurts the masculine outside of myself, absolutely. Yes. And I don't want to minimize the outer experiences. We are each whole unique beings, and that person has some spiritual tests to look at. But more so, speaking to the self, is I'm withholding from myself my own container that holds me safe, that knows how to orient me, that is the authority that I listen to and I trust, and that I can actually merge with inside myself. Now that fragment of the feminine tries to then overcompensate for that in her feminine way, right? She tries to protect and provide for herself in a feminine way by projecting the image of masculine, but she doesn't really know what the masculine is like. She doesn't really know the feeling of the masculine because she's rejected and projected it out because she doesn't want anything to do with it. So when we are not relating with ourselves, and this same principle goes for the masculine with the feminine side. When we are withholding from ourselves, our wholeness, and we are saying that there's something about another we don't like, we're missing out on an opportunity for intimacy about that thing that we're thinking that we don't like, which is often a personality identification, and we are creating a problem versus an acknowledgement and an allowance of the existence of something to be without our interference, right? Whether we like it or not, there it is, it's there, right? So how do we relate with it? If the outer is also inner, how do I relate with it? If I don't want to relate with it, I'm pushing it out. And what happens when we push it out? What happens when we project or transfer the energy, right? Are we creating wholeness within ourselves? Are we seeing our wholeness within ourselves? Are we in contact with that wholeness in ourselves? Or are we in thinking we're in wholeness, but operating in part of ourselves, thus pain and suffering? So when the masculine pushes out his feminine, then we start talking about rigidity, right? The feminine is representing flow and creativity and surrender and openness, imagine expansion, softness, vulnerability. That's different from the masculine power. And more so, power is strength, not to be confused with the power that's cut off from God, that godly power that comes from connection in God and the strength to carry out these things. So the feminine is bringing in depth. What she's also bringing in is a full spectrum of life because she is life itself. So he cuts himself off from life in all of its facets. And when he says, I want this, but not this, he's limiting life within himself. And then he himself is putting himself more and more rigid because life within him can't exist or flow because he's so regulated and controlling of his life, right? And that control comes out on the outer, right? The female in that masculine presence is going to feel that she can't be herself. She can't. So the byproduct of our inner withholding of the outer becomes the distortions in which we live our lives. And then we condition the world that we aren't actually allowing ourselves to become free of the world. And that's the important facet for us to love life and allow life to be as it is, that we learn to get bigger, create an upward spiral of expansion, of awareness, becoming aware that we're aware, that this is here, that this exists, what's going on in our bodies, how the perceptions that are happening in a multidimensional way when we become multidimensional beings that are smelling the flowers that bring us more deeply into presence, that our mind becomes more full of nothing, so that everything is possible. I see also, I'm noticing that even talking about that is kind of opening up a whole realm that I'm not necessarily looking to get into, but I wanted to illustrate this masculine feminine principles on the outer, the withholding of that, how that denies us our unity on the inner. And then byproduct is all we can have on the outer is conflict. There's conflict that's on the outer, it's because the conflict had already started on the inner with our thoughts, the way that we're choosing to project onto the world and say, it is this way. And so the ask then is to get curious, and the curiosity about what we're thinking, becoming aware of the impulse to act, of the pain that's arising without acting upon it. Becoming more aware of who we are in truth. And allowing others to also be as they are, recognizing that as I limit the other in the rightness or wrongness of that, there's a greater truth still yet to be discovered that has a greater reality of the rightness and wrongness of something. To even put it in the terms of something so black and white, that we start to understand that we're not actually, we can't be describing things in such binary ways as to say it's this and only this. If not, it points to this. And the experience of this will be the teacher, because the experience of that ends up teaching us all of the languages, attuning us to all the frequencies that give us the words inside of ourselves to become witness to a new truth and a new possibility and a new awareness of who we are, which is always expanding and growing until we limit ourselves and our understanding, and we stop allowing life and others to be as they are, and we tell them who they are, and forget to first see the divinity, because it's the divinity within us in wholeness and a unity in which the heaven outside of us is known. So it's by cultivating our own heaven within our own earth, within our own body, purifying our own way of seeing, which means to become responsible. And if we have projected out and we have made the masculine the enemy, becoming responsible is going to be a task of reclaiming the masculine within ourselves, right? That also means masculine with masculine, right? This is not gender specific. We're talking about primordial, fundamental energies of creation, not about gender. That responsibility then will be difficult to reclaim. So we're going to want to look at what we're denying outside of ourselves to give us a clue as to what we're denying on the inside of us. And the more that we can reclaim more of our space and see that what it is that is going on inside of us, the more we can see and observe the changes that are going on outside of us as a result of doing the work inside of ourselves. So as we change, the whole world changes. Thank you for being with me.